see, and are all our panelists in the room? Do we have a couple more, Sean? Okay, great. Thanks very much for coming. I know it's been a long day and the afternoon sessions always drag, so we'll try to liven it up. My name is David Perry, and I'm always grateful to have Sean ask me to moderate. Very quickly, my firm, David Perry & Associates, does mainly government affairs versus strictly consumer or tech PR. Our largest client is actually the San Francisco Mayor's Office. We tend to work on really easy projects like America's Cup, which I don't have to tell you has been a challenge unto itself. Do a lot of public safety campaigns, and at the moment our largest client is George Lucas, promoting the Lucas Cultural Arts Museum, which is being proposed for the Presidio. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And one of the things that has come up a lot for us in the last 2 years is app development. There is a dedicated app for America's Cup. More and more our government relations clients want to know how they can use an app to get out words and information about their events. So we have some experts today to talk about that. Let's start right here on the left with Shane. If you could give us about 30 seconds, a minute on who you are and what you do in the app space.
Sure. Shane Mayer, I'm a founder of Guidely. I also do their sales and marketing and just about everything else you do when you're at a very small startup. We make apps for events. So we, for example, do the official app for San Francisco Pride, and LA Pride, and DC Pride. We make it quick and easy to make an app for your event. The app for your event is basically like the paper guide you might get at the event, except for you download it to your phone. And what's also unique about us is that we are a sponsorship platform. So we're connecting brands that want to be at events with a concentrated demographic of people who attend an event. So for example, we brought Showtime Television to our Pride events this year. And that's more about my company than me, but that's more interesting.
All right.
My name is Sarah Cornwall. I'm the marketing director at AppBacker. AppBacker has two services. We help developers crowdfund their app by raising money from family and friends. Unlike most platforms, the people that they raise money from then make a profit from the retail sales as the retail sales come in. So the developer raises money and receives that money for development, and the people that backed it make a profit, but the developer isn't out of pocket for any money. If the retail sales don't come in, the developer doesn't owe any money. So it's a nice middle ground and everyone wins. We also have a product for Android apps that we help them get distribution on very trusted sources through OEM stores and carriers and different third-party stores. And because of that, we work with a lot of partners in the mobile app space, different marketing agencies, different stores, different large-size partners that have a lot of different pain points.
Hi there, I'm Daniel Sevet from I Do Move. I'm come here from Israel, so I apologize for my overwhelmingly thick Middle Eastern accent. I guess the most useful experience I have for this panel is actually in a previous job. I worked at Autodesk that acquired a small startup in Israel, and we launched from there an app which within the first year was downloaded about 10 million times. So I can speak a little bit about that. Now at iDoMove we specialize in personalized video, which is changing the way companies communicate, broadcasting one-to-many messages and trying to find a way of broadcasting one-to-one messages with personalized video, mass producing from a video template, so that every single person gets a message that's directed at them, actionable by them, and useful by them, and we'll see if that has some application here as well.
My name is Reg Snodgrass. I a lot of different hats. But I helped launch Scout, which was one of the largest and first mobile dating iPhone apps. Probably about 60 million users now, and the boys are kicking a lot of ass. I'm very proud of them. I was at Alcatel-Lucent, and I worked with startups all over the world to launch and develop relationships with really large companies. I do some stuff with VentureBeat on their mobility, like subject matter expert, and then I also just recently started Stained Glass Labs, which is an early stage venture fund for glass and other wearable platform technologies. And yeah, just glad to be here, hanging out with everybody.
Great. First question is going to be for Sarah, and then we'll go down the line and we'll have some questions for everybody. And if anyone has any questions that you would like to ask, just so I can kind of keep it going, feel free to just put the question on a piece of paper and just kind of put it up here on the corner, and I'll have Sean bring it up to me, and that way we'll try to catch up some of the time that I know we're behind on. So Sarah, how does someone or a client make money with an app?
That is the magic question. And unfortunately, I'm sure most people know this, there is such a small percentage of app companies that make a huge amount of money, and then it drops dramatically from there. So the key is to, and if you're an independent developer or a small-size developer, it is very tough to get up there. Very literally, I think the way to make money is, what we're seeing nowadays, is free apps with lots of in-app purchases. Unfortunately, that can sometimes be a little manipulative. My daughter downloaded a $99 in-app purchase last week, which I had to call Apple about. But that's the monetization strategy, and it works. Especially for game and arcade apps, I think that's the best way for them to make money. And then make sure that, more than anything else, make sure that they have a good product. I think apps, more than anywhere else, you cannot market a bad product, and you have the flexibility to make a good product, because you can always go back and do updates and make it better, make it better, make it better. If you have a bad app, bringing a crowd to it through PR is just going to hurt you, because it's so easy to give bad reviews and bad rankings, and it's just going to plummet, and it's just going to be a waste of money to put any marketing behind that.
Now, Daniel, you've done a lot of work in other countries, namely in Israel. How different is app development and app popularity outside of the United States? I.e., does anyone care about this stuff outside of the Bay Area?
So, yes, I think is the quick answer. I think we're all functioning in a global economy. My experience was never specifically in Israel, but the app development took place in Israel. I found that the community there, at least when I was working with Autodesk, the team that we had in Israel just ended up being, I don't know if this is a cultural thing, much more nimble, much more open to trying new things, much more available to experiment and iterate than a very sort of slow-moving vessel that we encountered with our colleagues here in the Bay Area. And they saw that very quickly and acknowledged that there were teams outside the traditional American working environment that were able to do things, I think, in a different and pejoratively better way. But in terms of what works and what things are different in different countries, one of the great advantages we found was localizing your app. Made a huge difference, and Autodesk was always very good at this, and we did it very early on with the app, that we localized every single thing about the app into languages which I would never have encountered previously. We did Korean, and we did Chinese, and simplified Chinese, and difficult Chinese, if that's the opposite of simplified Chinese, and Portuguese. Traditional, that's what it was, yes. And we just found that not just localizing the app, but then localizing the information on iTunes as well, having that in different languages, which seemed like something. It seems like a no-brainer, but then a lot of people who localize the app don't bother localizing the information where you can actually get the app. And all these things had instant impact in each country as we introduced each language, and we did a whole bunch, 7, 8 languages in the first place, and then we went back and did Russian and Arabic afterwards as these things came online. And each time we had this, doing very little marketing or PR in these countries, and by very little I mean none. Sorry to tell that to a room full of PR people, but just by making it available in each of the stores, in each of the languages, we saw the necessary bump in each time. So certainly these things, there is a global appetite for apps. It helped that the company producing it was Autodesk, which was had a global presence, but definitely there is a world beyond the Bay Area.
I remember when Queen Elizabeth and the Pope both got their YouTube page. I remember thinking, well, boy, if they've got one, I got to get one. We all try to keep up with the latest thing. I mean, that was 5, 6 years ago. Reg, what are we looking at as far as what is going to be the next technological leap in app development? I mean, have we peaked?
I mean, I'm an Oklahoma boy, and so I go back to. So when we launched on the iPhone, I think it's really interesting to say that we were the first to do, not maybe the first, but we did in-app purchases before Apple allowed it to happen. And the App Store marketplace today is extremely different than what it was today. Today you drop an app and no one actually gives a shit. But back in the day, like when you had your app and you launched it, we were seeing 1,000, 2,000 users organically a day. That does not happen anymore unless you have a very strong marketing and PR channel to kind of back you up, and that means more than just TechCrunch. It means being able to engage with the lifestyle side. And also, just to kind of bring it back to this all ties back to the technology piece, but being able to monetize in those platforms means being able to understand the users that you have and being able to connect with them in a way that you can gate something where they don't get pissed off about it. So you gate the things that they really enjoy in a way that makes them happy and appreciate how you're paying for that. And then just to kind of tie it all the way back in is that environment that I had, or that I saw just before the apps were launched, is very close and very similar to what we're seeing in wearable technology. And I go back to the Oklahoma thing. I knew when a tornado was coming versus a thunderstorm because I'd been through tornadoes. And we're seeing this next jump with wearable technology. Maybe it's not glass, maybe it's the quote watches that I know are coming that I can't talk about. But everything is set up in the same way. And so if you want to advise your clients to look at something where they're going to get significant uptick, where people are actually going to give a shit, they're not going to care if somebody builds an iPhone app today. But as Trulia was a case, Trulia demonstrated just, hey, we got a glass app, which was, no one could really build a glass app yet. And they said it, and everyone wrote about it, and everyone talked about it on the street and everywhere, because you know what, that's what's sexy. And so, yeah, I think the next evolution may not be blow you away with the technology because it's always been here, but the next sexy evolution is wearables and that self-serving. Thank you for that.
I was going to expand on that point a little bit because there's the devices that are, and building for them is great, but also you can take that down one level when you're advising app developers. If you get to the point of advising them about the app itself, a lot of times the apps that are featured on Apple App Store and Google Play and everything are the ones that use the latest app products of the new operating systems, and Apple's just sent out a bunch of emails about iOS 7. So if an app developer looks at those features and starts building out for those features, they have a much higher chance of being featured in the App Store because that's what Apple wants to do. They want to feature the developers and the apps that use the latest and greatest products. So it's sort of a little side note on that.
Now, Shane, you develop apps for a number of clients. What sort of client absolutely must have an app, and what sort of client, doesn't need one?
Yeah, that's a great
Or
question.
does everyone need one from your point of view?
No, I really don't think everybody needs an app. A lot of stuff you can do on the web, you can do on the mobile web. I'll tell you, the best reason to do an app for an event is because an app will work on your phone even if you don't get network connectivity, which is really important for a big event with a lot of people. So for example, San Francisco Pride is the second largest event in California. There's about 1 million people down at the Civic Center at the peak, and you can barely get a text message in or out. So an app to get around Pride, to give you the map of what's going on, the schedule of all of that, is useful. It's going to work whether you have network or not. Lots of events take places in parks, in rural areas, and that's where an app is really useful. The other thing that we do is we promote our sponsors through activities. And apps do allow you to use some of the features that are coming out in the new operating systems to play games, to engage people, and we engage them with the sponsors. So those are areas where apps are really useful. And the thing is, apps are very expensive also. It's most people don't make them because they're expensive. Our whole business model is trying to make it affordable or even profitable for events. But if you're not going to see a profit, you really have to question why you're going to invest in it if you really need it.
I would almost say that if you're advising any of your customers to build apps and they're a media company or their business is not in the app business, outside of events, and it's a very specific use case, it's very niche, you're making a foolhardy mistake and you're going to really object to your client, because it's rare when you see anything actually work in this space. Rare, I know one, that's Mondelez Victoria Twisting. That's it.
But if it is an event, you should call me.
Shameless plug, I love that. We have a new panelist that just beamed in. Do a quick introduction and give us about a minute on your expertise.
Oh, thanks, guys. Hey, I'm Heather Meeker, the founder of Meeker Quinn. It's a PR marketing, branding, digital strategy consultancy. I've worked in the mobile app space since 2008 with a company called Whirl. It was one of the first location-based apps. It was acquired by Groupon. And it's one of Kleiner Perkins' iPhone companies. I'm now working with another iPhone company called TextPlus. So I've been in the mobile app space for quite some time, and I primarily handle PR. So that's the angle I can help with.
All right, so Heather, throw this right to you. Client says to you, okay, I got an app, I've developed it, you're going to make it famous, you're the Flack of all time. How do you measure success? Not the success of the app, but how do you measure the success of the coverage you get for that app?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues we're facing right now is that there are so many apps in the market. I think Google Play just announced 1 million apps. iOS, Apple has over 1 million apps. So a lot of these app developers are trying to differentiate their app out of 2 million. And it used to be that you could put an app in the store and it would maybe rise to the top because there weren't that many. Now there are so many that you're competing with, right? So how do you measure success? I mean, I think it's really difficult these days. PR people are having to work hand in hand with marketers on their paid strategy to kind of get the app in the right section of the App Store, right? It's got to be the right description, be in the right section. And we're working a lot with marketers to kind of define goals together. PR, increasingly, at least the goals that I'm being held to, are more user acquisition more than anything. Clients are looking to get a lot of downloads and a lot of usage, and they're thinking that PR and digital strategy can lead to that. And so it's a little bit less these days about press coverage. It's a little more about if you get maybe one great TechCrunch story, they're trying to measure if that has an impact on actual downloads and usage. It's a little bit of a different proposition for PR.
Great. And just real quickly, if anyone has a question, if you write it down, hold up your hand, someone will come and get it or bring it up to me, and I'll be happy to come out and get it. Question for everyone, right down the row. What do you read that impacts your decisions in the app space? TechCrunch, Mashable, what is it? What is it that you read that you go, wow, if I read something about a really cool app there, I believe it. I just don't believe it's some PR person that's sleeping with the editor. Present company excluded, that was...
The Sarah Palin answers, I read everything. Social, so I'm paying attention to what my friends are talking about, what they're saying on Facebook, what apps they're using. And I use a lot of apps, and I look at a lot of apps, and I think, boy, I really love that feature, and I wish we could afford to build that feature, and someday we build that feature.
I read a lot of business blogs about the Application Developers Alliance and Vision Mobile and Fierce Mobile all do a really good daily email that sort of hits all the high notes. In terms of as a consumer, I listen to my friends and family a lot. I think the last app I downloaded was one that someone had talked about like on LinkedIn and sounded like it fit a need. The issue with apps, the good thing and the bad thing about apps is that most of them are free. And you can download and you can try them out, and 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, you can delete them if you don't like them. It's not like a book, it's not like a movie. So, I mean, that's a big problem that developers face, that within the first 3 months, they've lost 75% of their consumers, they've deleted the app. So that's a good thing about it. You can find a lot of apps you want, but it's up to developers to be able to get enough face time with those consumers so they actually stick around and use it, and it becomes a tool in their toolbox.
Daniel?
I think similar to what we've heard already, I read my kids' Facebook feed. And if you don't know, I've got 3 revolting teenagers, and they are much more clued in than probably any of us will ever be into what's going on for them, and I think they're big consumers of these kind of things, and as Sarah said, they consume and then they throw it away as well. I try to avoid, or I tend to avoid, doesn't take a lot of effort, a lot of the tech press, because I'm not sure how, again, long-term their interest is in the apps that they write about. And the ones that end up sticking are the productivity apps that show up in places where you're not looking for them. So if I'm reading an article about something else in a newspaper that mentions that they got to it through something, that's how things tend to rise up. So news feeds and odd places.
Great.
I get to test out a lot of the apps early on, because a lot of my buddies are, we all kind of grew up together in tech, and Heather knows what that's about, right? So I get to see a lot of things, so I look at those things about, it's like, hey, Reg, I did this, next, that's neat, but also, yeah, I mean, it's a blend of, hey, I hear or read a story on XYZ blog, and then I because of, my network, I get to see a lot of the different things continually pop up, and if I hear a couple of good stories about it, I guess maybe 7 posts on Facebook, I'm down, and I just install it, no matter what it is, and then I hate it.
Heather?
Okay, what Reg said, plus, as a PR person, I have to read everything. I also have to listen to the radio, NPR, I have to watch the Ellen Show. I mean, how I kind of gauge it, much to your teenagers, is that if it's on the Ellen Show and they talk about Vine now, like the top Vine or for the day, I mean, then you know it's kind of broken through, because my clients are want to be more consumer facing. So I want to keep up with the news as well as broadcast and radio. But really what Reg said is, if something really takes off in the tech community, it usually is going to break through your consumer. So that's where you need to focus your efforts early on.
Okay, we've only got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to stick with you, Heather, then come right back down the panel. Some tangible advice, 30 seconds of news, a real good tip that the people in the audience can use when they're telling their client what sort of app to develop, or where they're trying to tell their client, this is how we're going to pitch your app.
From the pitch side, one thing that we do in PR and one thing that our agency provides is product feedback. Doesn't matter what you tell a reporter or what you tell a consumer. If the product isn't great or it's not differentiated in some way, they're not going to use it. Reporters won't write about it. So at the end of the day, I think the product does need to speak for itself. It's not about features, it's about an experience that someone comes to the table with. So I try to teach our clients that really the product has to be at its best before we really go out and talk about it.
There's nothing stronger to a press person than a passionate CEO that has built great products, that has strong relationships with the community. And 1, 2, the product has to be really good, and by really good I mean it has to surpass the viral coefficient that's necessary to be successful. And then 3, there are no more breakout apps. It's over. You're not going to have a breakout anymore. It's a long-term game. You have to have a long-term strategy that actually is built on metrics and knowledge about how to create and build this stuff. It's a business now. It's not oh, hey, we all struck gold and now we can continue to do this.
Daniel?
I would say, you're making your app not for the press people or the guy who's going to interview you or may possibly write about you. It has to work for the people who are going to use it. And they're your biggest asset. People that use your app, make yourself available so they can contact you. When they contact you, respond to them, write their stories, spread their stories, let them tell their stories, and create a product, iterate that product, give them feedback that you're iterating that product, and complete that cycle always. And if someone chooses to write about you because it so happens that this month the story you've told or the app you've released happens to be sexy for a particular publication, that's great. But you can't rely on that. You need to put out a good product, make it available to people, and keep improving it.
Sarah?
One thing that a lot of people don't realize, the market app ecosystem is so young that you can't effectively track where installs come from. You can't know that an article brought 200 downloads or 200,000 downloads to an app. So I think as experts and as consultants, you have to define metrics with the developer much early on that may not be installs or user retention, because you don't have any control of that and it can't accurately measure. So define other metrics that everyone agrees upon early. The store, how it ranks in the store, how the ratings are, how the reviews are, things that you can track and that you do have control over, because once the app's downloaded, you don't have any control over that if it's not a great app and it doesn't get a lot of user retention. That's something completely out of your control.
And Shane?
I agree with everything the panelists said, actually, which is in line with our business model. And I'll explain everything everything I know about apps in our business right now, which is, so we do apps for events, and about 20 to 60% of attendees download the app. That is based on 3 things. The demographic, right? If it's a tech conference, you're going to have 90% download it. If it's a quilting conference, you're going to have a much lower downloading rate. The value that you put in the app, so has the organizer put something useful in the app? Does it have the schedule of the day that people are checking back in, or maybe a discount to a vendor out there? And then how well it's marketed. Our events market our app, and what I'll say is we're a little different than kind of what we're talking about more generally with big apps. We're not trying to make the next Instagram. We're trying to make very localized, which I heard echoed here, localized apps. It's for that event. And 20 to 60% is a good download rate for an event, because you're going to reach a concentrated demographic. That model only works if it's low cost, because you can go with somebody like us, there are our competitors, and think about an app that's very targeted, that has a value, and isn't going to cost you a lot, can actually make you money.
Okay, last question. It will be a one-word and a one-number answer, although I'm really offended by the quilting remark. I mean, please, please. And then we'll take a question from the audience. Going down here, what is your favorite app? One word. And how many unused apps do you now have on your smartphone that you have not looked at in, I don't know, since Nixon was president or something? Go ahead.
My husband might not appreciate it, but my favorite app is Grindr. Finding people, seeing who's around is just always
I'm
fascinating.
happy tonight with Shane Mayer. That's good.
What was your question? Favorite
And
app?
how many? Yeah.
I delete apps. I don't have a lot of apps that I don't use.
Great.
I delete a lot of apps too, so probably about 20. My favorite, the tool that I'm using and that is ideal for my mobile phone is Shazam, because I have been in so many near-death accidents by Shazamming some song that just came on the radio as I'm cruising down 101, but I can't imagine what I would do without it.
So in the spirit of the embarrassing admissions that we've had earlier on, I guess my favorite app, the first thing I look at when I wake up in the morning, is the Daily Mail app, which has the largest and most frequently updated collection of celebrities in bikinis that you can find anywhere in the world. My wife would be very upset if I was using Grindr, so I decided I'd wipe that off early on after messing around with it for a couple of days. But I prune, get rid of everything that I'm not using, so I have very few unused apps.
Great. Right.
So yeah, I mean, basically, I'm kind of love self-promotion, so I use Facebook all the time to promote all the interesting things about my life because it's awesome. And but then yeah, I mean, other than that, I use every app that I have at least once or twice a day because I have horrible ADHD and the damn little notifications pop up. I have to get rid of everything, so I have everything.
There you go. Heather, and then we'll take one question from the audience, and then we're at time, and we'll head off the stage.
I made a new favorite app, and I had the idea for this 3 years ago. It's called Time Hop, and it brings up all of your old Twitter and Facebook posts and feeds from years and years ago, and it tells you what happened that day in history. It's really cool. Should love this app. I love it. I should work for them. Anyway, so if you haven't downloaded it, it's pretty cool because everything's so ephemeral online, and I love the fact that it's actually solidifying where you were. You can look back at your life, and it's pretty fun. So.
And how many unused apps do you have on your smartphone?
I actually only have apps that I use for the most part. I'm a little OCD like that. If I don't use it in 2 or 3 months, I'll delete it.
Great. Let's wrap it up with a question from the audience there.
Hi. So I have a question about the promotion of the apps. So what do you think about the promotion of the of your app through bloggers? Like in terms of bloggers, like a channel. It's like you're promoting it through 1,000 bloggers who write about this particular industry niche, and then you just have some magic bullet point that you can actually reach them out. So what is your experience on that, and if you use it? This kind of channels, and if you do not use this kind of channels, what do you think about it in the future? Thanks.
So we did, this past Pride season in June, we did San Francisco, LA, and DC Pride. And in DC, the Washington Post mentioned the app. And we actually can track where the links are coming from. And there was a huge spike in traffic and lots of downloads because Washington Post mentioned it. So yeah, I mean, press works, and people are paying attention. Of course, there's people who are probably going to go to Pride anyway and now learned that there's this app and then downloaded it. That's probably as much as I can speak to that question.
I meet a lot of developers who, when they start talking about bloggers right away, and they are, for some reason, they only think about bloggers that write about apps. And when we sit down and talk to them and point out to them that their app isn't a game app, that's not the audience they're trying to reach, they sort of wake up and realize that not enough developers reach out to bloggers in the vertical space. I worked with a developer who built an app for fishing in California, and he was trying to get it reviewed on app review sites, which made no sense at all. And we talked, and he realized that he needed to get bloggers that obviously talk about that space, and he actually made a lot of good connections, not beyond the app itself. He made a lot of good connections with industry experts who he should have reached out to before. So it was organic, and it was very, very, very beneficial. So it's a good thing, and I think you can find bloggers with a smaller audience if you can't get the biggest bloggers to write about you, you can just keep going down the list until you do find bloggers that are very happy to write about you and have a relationship with you. So there's always someone out there who can write about you.
Anyone else before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I would echo that bloggers who write about apps are a big time suck because that's all they do is write about apps, and you're not comparing apples with apples. I work with a very successful productivity app, and there was just no value in talking about it with people who were never going to use it, weren't going to be designing their own home or creating any architectural plans. And so finding that vertical and talking to people who actually care about what you do, rather than the fact that it happens to be an app, is probably key if you're going to talk to bloggers.
So it's like the industry is much more important than the app by itself.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's really important for you to understand is it's great social proof for investors, but it's also, if you are written up in another, like TechCrunch or anything else like that, it's a lot more easier for you to get into the industry magazines. So don't discount that, and just, like, if you want somebody in a niche group to write about you, you send them, oh, look, I'm in TechCrunch and VentureBeat and all these other things. You know, this is social proof. We're not just crazy guys that you should write about. So there's an important piece there of follow-on social proof that's there. But I mean, it's not going to get you installs. It's not going to get you downloads. In Scout, like, everyone loved to write about us back in the early days. We had tons of press. It wasn't until 3 years later that Andreessen Horowitz invested $20 million in what we did. But it's because we said, oh, well, you know, this isn't the gaming play. We're an acquisition company that generates revenue based off of users. And that's, you know, once we figure that formula out and stop chasing bloggers around, you know, guess what? The bloggers still wrote about us because that's their job, right? And as long as you're not an ass about it, they will. So, yeah.
So our panelists, let's give them a round of applause. And now we have to set aside.